Hey there, folks. Welcome to Spectrum Pulse. We talk about music, movies, art, and culture. And today we're starting our year-end list. And let's start off with the one that is inevitably the most popular, the top 10 worst hit songs of 2018. So I'm not going to mince words or waste your time here. 2018 was not a good year for the Hot 100. Perhaps not as bad as 2016, given how many songs were outright atrocious that year. But 2018 was not only an eventful and frankly exhausting year, but it was one where the Hot 100 as a singles chart didn't even really seem to matter. And yes, success on a manipulated ranking scale like the Hot 100 is always a bit of a shell game that most discerning artists recognize and then just ignore. But on some level, we still convince ourselves that it matters. You know, like the Grammys. But here's the fun thing. As much as I have characterized 2018 as the year of the album bomb, where thanks to playlist payola, no jokes anymore, let's call it what it is, an entire album will overrun the Hot 100, then the songs rarely last, which means when it comes to making the year-end list, you run into a weird split. The streaming hits that cling to relevance just long enough, normally in hip-hop and trap and R&B, and then the pop and then the pop-adjacent songs or country or whatever rock is left that receive enough regular radio and sales promotion to hold up enough to weather the storm. And of course there's some overlap, but I was actually a little bit surprised how despite streaming hits getting so much more media attention, there's still a traditional pop structure that'll get hits on this chart. Now we'll get into the unfortunate side effects of this on the next year-end list, because there were side effects, but it's absolutely a shifting ecosystem, and there weren't many artists who could navigate that storm. But make no mistake, the ability to have charting success has never been proportional to the talent of the artist, and with trap being an oversaturated mess and most radio hits defaulting to the safest possible options for relevancy in a year where both Cumulus and iHeartRadio were on the cusp of bankruptcy, it was a rough year. And while I was more faintly embarrassed about the junk from 2017, 2018's bad stuff is in a different league. And keep in mind, this is just the stuff that debuted on the 2018 year-end Hot 100. So let's take out the trash, starting in no particular order with our dishonorable mentions. So I'm not sure about the point where reggaeton acts stopped trying, content with the knowledge that they were going to get a billion views regardless on YouTube. And indeed, this song has 1.4 billion views, but I can make the argument it was this song that triggered the switch. And while I could point to the protracted tooting synth that was so lazy in its progression, I'm surprised that Marshmello didn't write it. Let's also not ignore how they got the blocky percussion and how bored Nicky Jam and J Balvin sound on this beat. Reportedly, this is one hit that Nicky Jam did not write himself, and it's supposed to just coast on the vibes, but the entire song feels so airless, with no atmosphere to cultivate said vibe. Instead of feeling more effortless and breezy and fun, it just feels lazy and incredibly grating. Next. Honestly, Maroon 5 is not worth additional words at this point. They're kind of like Panic at the Disco, a husk of session musicians propping up a frontman who has long ago run out of ideas and for the most part has stopped caring. Hell, the only element out of the mix that seems well positioned are the vocals, but that only draws attention to the lyrics, which are overstuffed with repetition and suspiciously lacking any sort of detail surrounding what Adam Levine might have done in this bad relationship to trigger a possible breakup and her leaving him, or what he's going to do to actually change. In other words, it's a cross between The Reason by Hoobastank and Offset's humiliating attempt at a public apology for Cardi B. And in every case, the woman can and probably should do a lot better.
And watch the sunrise. One night it changed your whole life. Pop top, drop top, baby, it's a no-brainer. Put 'em up if you with me, yeah, 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 yeah. In the middle.
You know, it's very telling that Lil Wayne is not on this list. Most because he decided to release the Carter 5 and started making decent music again. Unlike this, which barely pretends to disguise the fact that it's a mugging ripoff of a hit from last year that was only so-so at best. Justin Bieber has rarely looked or sounded more punchable. Quavo is trying and failing to convince us he can blow this girl's mind. I mean, I heard Huncho Jack, man, that ain't happening. And Chance somehow shoved his impressive likability into negative numbers. And when you couple it with a melody comprised of a bassy synth and a couple of chipmunk fragments. I mean, look, the title of the song is the easiest punchline, but what I think is more telling is how the entire song is shot on a set of stages in the video instead of somewhere that actually could showcase a real luxury. To not see through all the cheap veneers being thrown up here, you have to be, well, brainless.
He's out his head, I'm on my mind. We got that love, the crazy kind. I am his and he is mine. In the end, it's him and I.
My 65 speed.
Alright, look, it's usually a bad move for dating couples to put out music celebrating that union. You're really tempting fate, folks, especially when it comes to just these two, who seem to have more cocaine and passive aggression than common sense or good vocabulary. Him and I is a song that's trying to milk the whole Bonnie and Clyde vibe, but it misses the fact that neither act has ever had the slightest convincing edge, and when the relationship sputtered out earlier this year, it made the song a humiliating postscript designed for high school Instagram stories trying to look more edgy. It's the bad things of 2018, except somehow more nakedly self-absorbed, but just as ruthlessly soulless and incredibly mediocre. Move on.
Sorry that I let you down. Let you down.
You know, it's very easy to give NF some sort of pass, given that in comparison to a guy like G-EAZY, he's got tighter flows and something of a distinctive lyrical idea in exploring the toxic relationship with his father. And I'll admit, I was probably one of those people who would have given him a pass until I heard this turd one too many times and basically realized I was judging it on the basis of nearly every other white male rapper shitting the bed this year. Like with G-EAZY, the problem is a serious lack of detail in a lot of the storytelling, a lot of musing surrounding embarrassment and paranoia, and a relationship where nobody is getting straight with anything and anyone. But what I've hated the most about this song is the hook, because apparently somebody told NF that a blend of chipmunk vocals and ex-ambassadors is how you want to sell this. The only reason it's not on the list proper is because NF is competent as an MC. So congratulations, you're the Christian version of Logic, who can spew flows for days and yet say so very, very little.
Walk it like I talk it, 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 woo. Walk it like I talk it, walk it like I talk it, ayy. Walk it like I talk it, walk it like I talk it. Yeah.
When I saw the video, this was a homage to Soul Train, I wanted to throw my computer through a window, because that show was a testament to 70s grooves and passion, and outside of the majority of the rest of culture too, this is none of either, with a rinky-dink keyboard line that will get stuck behind one of the stiffest trap grooves I've heard all year. And really, going through any Migos song on a lyrical level is completely pointless, but it's very telling that they claim they didn't buy their fame and success when you know that for some of that brand name flex saying they got a bag, and then for Offset to mention his vault full of assaults and then hitting a bitch, you know, I know he's referring to different things, it's called lazy word placement in the song, it raised some unfortunate implications, and then take off planning to buy his own coffin early. Why? I mean, also Drake is here trying to mend bridges from when he jacked Migos' style 3 years ago. Yeah, Drake, you're not getting away so easily. I've got more to say about you later.
Easier said than done. I thought you were the one listening to my heart instead of my head. You found another one, but I am the better one. I won't let you forget me.
So you know, I think I've been more than forgiving when it comes to trap acts and calling out misogyny, but I think throughout the course of album bombs with Future and entirely too many guest verses, I can comfortably say that Juice WRLD sounds like a misogynist. But can I also say he's a pretty shitty and juvenile songwriter too, hitting the Simple Plan brand of bargain barrel emo cliches surrounding how pretty girls are all evil and plastic? I mean, don't get me wrong, I totally get why this guy has a teenage fan base, but I also get why all of his fan base will be faintly embarrassed of him and themselves in 2 years at most. The only real catharsis I can get out of this is that Sting took the majority of the revenue from this song because of sample clearing issues, but given how I think that this guy might have a bit of staying power given how many other emo rappers have died over the past couple of years, it seems like a pretty small price. I mean, expect this guy to feature on my list going forward if he has more hits, and I get the distressing feeling that he will. So yeah, those all sucked. Let's move on to the list proper. Number 10. So here's a side frustration as a critic who primarily concerns himself with albums. When we cover pop acts, we often find deep cuts that got a lot of potential from artists that we otherwise might not like. And while we can never expect they'll be the lead-off single, we're not that lucky, by the time you're 3 or 4 singles in, you have to hope, right? There's really no excuse. But more often than not, we get this.
But you can't blame me for trying. You know I'll be lying, saying.
So I feel confident in saying that while Daya might have been the weakest of the 2010s mainstream pop set and she's long gone, Halsey is easily the one I like the least. Her aspirations to alternative sounds are always painfully undercooked. She's a songwriter who defines the term basic, and all her music is a smug veneer of ego without the presence, pipes, or charisma in order to back it up. And while Bad at Love isn't quite the worst thing from Hopeless Fountain Kingdom, at least has a hook behind it, but you can make the same comparison to, say, Weak by AJR, a song operating on the exact same emotional sentiment of trying to glorify underwhelming shittiness, but being unable to have any fun with it. No jokes here, she actually responded to a fellow critic on Twitter trying to deflect this as playful self-deprecation, which at least with that dumbass key change I might be able to see with AJR, but this is the most by the numbers and undercooked self-aware framing I have heard in some time. At least when Taylor Swift tries to play the villain, she's at least having some fun with it, even if nobody else is. But I can't see anybody having fun with this song either. There's no groove to it. The off-key synth line has the consistency of sludge. Halsey's attempts at belting have no power on the hook, and her songwriting defaults to plugging in space by repeating words, and yet still winds up being utterly incoherent, because for as much blame as she tries to throw on her exes, she's the one who is self-destructive. That's the core of the song. And yet also, it's a little bit rich that you're dumping girls for doing thin white lines given your antics with G-EAZY Halsey. But really, given that your primary associations in your career have been him, Machine Gun Kelly, and the Chainsmokers, I gotta say, hypocrisy's a good look for your brand of white bread mediocrity. I mean, you could have released Strangers, Halsey. I hope Billie Eilish replaces you. Next, number 9. So yeah, you could make the argument this was a big year for Drake, but it was also a very bad year, and I'd be loath to not include him a few more times on this list. Right now, he is on single number 7 from the double album Scorpion. This is single number 6, and as somebody who's currently living in the 6, yeah, bad association. Nobody wants it here either.
This a rolling, not a stop. Watch shit don't never stop.
You know, I gotta say it, the song certainly lives up to its title. It's a persistent migraine that never fucking stops, and it breaks my heart that No ID apparently helped produce this. Most because I question what the hell he even did. The melody is either locked into the bass or a few spurting flickers of synth. There's no tone to this besides monotony. And it's not like Drake is spraying any sort of intense wordplay or really hard bars. He spends the song sounding like he's pouting, muttering off his ad-libs, and lying his ass off with a petulance that would shame the current president. Putting gimmicks because they're too scared to rap? This coming from the guy who can never respond with actual bars to Pusha T. The remaining half of the second verse that's not remotely convincing or intimidating? You're not that scary, Drake, and the instrumentation's not backing you up. The second verse is more flexing that adds up to nothing. But really, the most searing indictment of the song comes in the line, "I can hardly take offense." Yeah, we'll keep coming back to this, but keep telling yourself that, Drake. In the meantime, it's a boring slog that barely deserves to be called album filler and that bloated corpse otherwise known as Scorpion. If it wasn't such a tuneless headache, it'd be forgotten by pretty much everybody. Probably still will be in a year or so. Next, number 8. So I've said this before when making these lists, there are often plenty of bad songs that are released, but to clinch a spot on this list is often just as relevant to consider what the song might represent. So while the song might be absolutely terrible, make no mistake, having seen its success in 2018, I hate what it could do in the future so much more.
If it's meant to be, it'll be, it'll be. Baby, just let it be. If it's meant to be, it'll be, it'll be. Baby, just let it be.
So whether you watch the charts or not, I don't know how anybody can listen to Meant to Be, tacked onto the ass end of Bebe Rexha's crappy debut album Expectations in order to boost its streaming position, and not see this as a complete systemic failure at every level. Let's not mince words. This is a pop song. Whether guitar accents here are the least important elements of the mix behind the piano, the trap percussion, and Florida Georgia Line braying pointless inanities, and when you factor in Bebe Rexha having no distinctive personality whatsoever, which absolutely comes through in the writing, you realize that the only reason this was successful in 2018 was because pop radio promoters needed something gutless and safe to plug the gap between Halsey and Post Malone. But since Florida Georgia Line are trying to make us all forget about their last non-country album and all with that collaboration collaboration with the Backstreet Boys, and they're on this song. It got billed on country playlists too. And since Music Row is full of inept bean counters trying to chase a bro country trend that died 3 years ago, they put it on the radio in Nashville too. Hence the story of a studio-managed nothing of a pop song becoming the longest-running #1 on the hot country song charts, and promoted further marginalization of women in country in favor of pop acts. So if Sarah Shook, Brandy Clark, and the Pistol Annies want to burn Music Row to the ground and salt the earth, I don't think I'm gonna mind complain, because this song is terrible. Number 7. So now we've reached the part of my list that'll be deemed controversial. And what's kind of gross is that anyone thinks me placing this song on this list is controversial in the first place. And to even explain why this song wound up on the year-end Billboard Hot 100, it is slightly nauseating. So yeah, if you thought this got ugly before...
I don't understand this. You're changing, I can't stand it. My heart can't take this damage. And the way I feel, can't stand it.
Okay, look, I have said my piece on XXXTENTACION. In my review of Question Mark, I was able to interpret and deconstruct his appeal at length. That was it for me. And while I still think that the album is misshapen, amateurish, and pretty awful as an artistic body of work outside the artist, it's hard to deny it reflects the intent of the artist. But then he died, and I don't have any emotions one way or the other. And I still don't. He's gone to whatever comes next. There's no point at me being angry about him anymore. He's gone, it's over. But there are two groups of people I'm angry at. The die-hard fans who have continued to relentlessly deny everything he ever did in their attempt to rewrite history, completely ignoring the naked contradiction how it's that very human darkness that made X in any way compelling. And then the rapacious bastards in the music industry milking those diehards for all they're worth. And honestly, they kind of deserve each other, and I wouldn't even care if I didn't have to cover these embarrassing fragments on Billboard Breakdown and then have to deal with the diehards attempting to gaslight everybody in the comments and really living up to their idol. But let's get some context here. Let's step outside of this, because if you're outside of that toxic feedback loop and any cult of personality, this is an amateurish piano dirge whining about his girl changing and he doesn't like it. That's it. The appeal is very punk in that anybody could do it, and like most punk, it was eaten up by the machine for posthumous packages and streaming support, which got this song here. Capitalism, ladies and gentlemen. Let's just move on. Number 6. Well, that got pretty heavy fast. Thank God the next song just sounds atrocious. That makes things so much easier.
Haven't I made it obvious? Haven't I made it clear? Want me to spell it out for you? F-R-I-N-D-S. Haven't I made it?
Okay, seriously, England, you've already tried shipping us Rita Ora, and you're not fooling anybody by following her up with ANNE-MARIG. They've got little to no distinctive personality. We don't want them. Hell, we already have a Bebe Rexha. We don't want her either. So it almost kind of makes perfect sense that ANNE-MARIG teamed up with Marshmello to produce an anthem to putting people in the friend zone. In other words, one of the most nakedly uncomfortable and awkward things to do in any sort of relationship. So why are you trying to celebrate it and spell it out so many damn times? And that discomforting ickiness pervades the entire song, top to bottom. The awkward conversational cadence that's not quite sneering enough to have any bratty charisma, but just enough to flip my allergic reaction to this sort of toxic melodrama. Then you have the flat synths, the gutless acoustic line that doesn't fit at all with the trap percussion. It makes me wonder what Marshmello is even doing here when there's no real drop to the song. And then finally, a G-funk synth that is slathered onto the final chorus with no groove or reason. I made the Rita Ora comparison before, but the tone of this song overall reminds me a lot more of Cher Lloyd's similar brand of teenage toxicity that we got on Want You Back in 2012. And you know what? Say what you will about Cher Lloyd, she had a personality. Next, number 5. So there's a general understanding of when it comes to certain types of songs that you don't really hear them on the Hot 100. Or at the very least, they're very rare. In country, you rarely hear songs with a narrative. In hip-hop, you don't typically hear a bars fest or a diss track chart. Yes, I know with Rap Devil and Killshot, we had exceptions this year, but keep in mind neither Duppy Freestyle or The Story of Adidon charted. And rock... yeah, like we're gonna get a rock song anymore in the Hot 100. We could wish. And one of these categories, it is the posse cut. The songs that were big in the 2000s, especially in crunk and hip-hop, nearly always run long, and they're rarely more than the sum of their parts, especially even the artists involved. Sadly, they're not exclusive to hip-hop, and it doesn't look like everybody got the message.
De mi vida te boté.
So I'll be very honest, I actually get a little bit uncomfortable putting reggaeton songs on my worst list, because I don't speak Spanish, as you've all no doubt informed me, and there's a very real chance that I'm missing some sort of cultural idiosyncrasy that redeems this. Somehow, judging by some of my critic peers in Latin America, I don't think that was an issue here, as I don't know who likes this song. I mean, clearly somebody does. Like with every other reggaeton song, it's got like 1.4 billion views on YouTube right now, but I can't imagine why. For one, the song opens up with the auto-tune caterwauling of Ozuna playing off these dreary pianos and a really forgettable beat, and none of it evolves or changes to show potent progression beyond tacking on more mugging condom accidents to brag about kicking some girl to the curb. And here's the thing, I don't mind a good, angry, or even petty breakup song, but the key to making that work is brevity. You get in, you get out. You don't want to wallow in being a total dick for 7 minutes, especially when the production isn't fun or interesting. And that's before you translate the lyrics. And here's a bit of advice. Don't. I mean, I would expand upon that, but really, that's giving this thoroughly unpleasant turd more thought than it deserves. This will be forgotten soon. Let's move on. Number 4. So this is a song that, to understand the depths of its awfulness, you need to understand the timing surrounding its release. Because it was a bad song on the first couple of listens, but that would only take 4 days to make it one of the biggest miscalculations of Drake's entire career.
I'm upset. 50,000 on my head is disrespect. So offended that I had to double check. I'ma always take the money over sex. That's why they need me out the way, what you expect.
The fact that Drake didn't pull this single immediately, that instead he decided to double down and film a music video studded with cameos from Degrassi and Jay and Silent Bob and beyond, it speaks volumes of the arrogance on display. It would almost be a marvel to behold if the song behind it wasn't one of the worst on the double album, and arguably one of the worst of Drake's entire career. Fundamentally, it fails on the most basic of terms. The song is about sounding upset, and Drake at best sounds constipated, like that meal at the Cheesecake Factory on Child's Play is unsettling his stomach. And you have to wonder if that fight sentiment carried into this song, which is all about bragging about not having a big enough price being set on his head, not paying child support, and taking dick pics. And according to the second verse, that's the only thing that gets him respect. And you have the nerve, the audacity, Drake, to interpolate Beyonce here for dumping this woman. Yeah, there is something that kept me on Pusha T's side in this whole endeavor. It's this. This song is worthless. It's an impressively low bar for Drake, and this is coming from a guy who's released Started From the Bottom, Pop Style, and Fake Love. And yet amazingly, this is in a class all on its own. Hey girls who spent the year dancing to Nice For What and In My Feelings, this is how Drake really feels about you. Just, keep that in mind. Number 3. So given that my expletives leveled against this guy on my previous 2 year-end list, I can imagine that some of you are noting a very specific absence of him previously on this year-end. The culture vulture otherwise known as Post Malone. Hey, call it like I see it, folks. But here's the thing. Off of Beer Bongs and Bentleys, I got my anger out last year with Rockstar, which I still hold as the worst song on the album. Psycho, it's boring and mediocre, but it didn't bother me, and neither did Better Now. Hell, Candy Paint might just wound up as one of my favorite songs of the year, hits regardless. No, if Post Malone to make this list, he'd have to dig back. But hell, I called it last year. I'm not gonna mince words here. If I Fall Apart had made the year-end list for 2017, it probably would fill this slot. So I saw Post Malone live this year, and he was terrible. Even with technical difficulties, he's sloppy on stage, and the pit was even worse. A throng of jeering white boys who threw bottles of piss and groped everything that moved. But what actively got me to leave the venue were the circle pits forming for this song. Arguably the worst song on Stoney, and Post Malone at his most execrable. He apparently wrote this song when he was a teenager, and man alive it shows. An incoherent morass of self-loathing and sexism as he calls this girl a devil in the form of a whore. Guess where Juice WRLD got it from? I mean, they're called succubi, Post Malone. Talk to Lil Uzi and learn some demonology. And with some of the most atrocious production of his entire career here too. The chipmunk fragments, the shredded haze of vocals, the desaturated guitars, a swamped out rubbery beat on the hook that's got no body, and the sort of howling yodel that sounds like Post Malone is passing a kidney stone. But again, the reason it doesn't work, it's on a fundamental level, is that we're supposed to make us feel feel Post Malone's pain and commiserate. And I can't do that when he's warbling in a very performative way and calling this girl shorty. I thought we learned this lesson with Justin Bieber 10 years ago. You don't let white guys use that word, primarily for their own sake, because it utterly guts any emotive power in the language and poetry. I mean, you want proof of that? If there was emotional power to this, it really got under their skin, even coked up white boys wouldn't be moshing to it. But you know what? Speaking of music that speaks exclusively to that set, number 2. So I'm sure you've noticed at some point, you might have noticed another very conspicuous absence on this list. The other big headline-grabbing artist of 2018 who goes by the name Tekashi 6ix9ine and will likely spend a significant amount of the next couple years in prison. What he got caught up in is far bigger than the underage sex acts that damned him in the first place. But you know what? I'm looking at the music, and I kinda get the appeal of a song like Gummo. It's obnoxious, it's blaring, it's sadistic, but it's the same shock value appeal of an artist like DMX or even Eminem had in the late 90s. And while I rarely like it, I get it. So about the worst thing you could do is feed him to the music industry that will completely misunderstand his one-dimensional appeal and try for some form of pop crossover.
I don't really want no friends. I don't really want no friends, no.
Okay, serious question. Besides industry hacks, who wanted this? Who wanted 6ix9ine to showcase his non-existent sensual side, strip away all his firepower that was his sole redeeming quality musically? Who wanted to pair with production from Murda Beatz that spends it all the runtime cultivating a sense of this oiling, creeping dread that fits with nothing? And who convinced Nicki Minaj, who spent 2018 doing her best to burn her public image to the ground in spectacular fashion, that the best idea was teaming up with him, with whom she's got no chemistry and seems utterly lost at the very bottom of the barrel? And putting aside how the song has no firepower or intensity or any coherent mood besides forcing somebody who might imagine a sexual encounter that nobody sane can find appealing behind these two, the lyrics, they're complete garbage. Between the facts that this flow was jacked from another rapper, 6ix9ine follows up in the Halsey route of repeating words to fill up space, and then playing eeny, meeny, miny, mo to kick girls to the curb. And with Nicki Minaj rapping about the brand of chips that after she doesn't climax with any of these guys. You know, it kind of contradicts the super soaker that 6ix9ine was implying, but hell, I'm not surprised. But the disconnected chips reference reminds me a lot of when Eminem did the same thing on That's All She Wrote 7 years ago, before he would go on to follow entirely too many of Nicki Minaj's same mistakes this year with only slightly less humiliating results, as a desperately insecure artist who sees themselves getting replaced and absolutely fumbles any attempt to stop it. But even then, I get the impression that Nicki Minaj is still kind of embarrassed by this song, because for as quickly as it was tacked on to Queen, it was taken off for that deluxe re-release. And for those who want more of 6ix9ine, hate to break it to you teenage white boys, your SoundCloud waifu is going away for a long, long time. Good riddance. And finally, number 1. None of you will be surprised by my number 1 pick. You all heard me rant about it at Billboard Breakdown at length, and given how many other lists this will make, which I'm assuming is pretty much all of them, I don't think there's anything I can say that'll top what has already been said. But before I try to put this to bed and smother it with all the pillows, I want to make one observation. To this day, there are people who will place Chris Brown as a king of R&B, despite the fact that I'd give failing grades to over half his albums, and he has at least 3 legit atrocities in his name, just in bodies of music in terms of albums as a whole. But even with all of that, if there was something to thoroughly disqualify him forever from that conversation, it's this song.
I woke up in Chris Brown's body. So how this shit turned into Freaky Friday.
The most appropriate words to describe this thing is gaslighting disguised as a really bad joke. It's a song that serves no larger purpose other than to pave over the annals of Chris Brown's string of unapologetic failures and past transgressions and become an anthem to his self-esteem and no others. It's self-deprecation with no punchline that reduces the black experience to the ability to say the N-word, and a fascination with genitalia that starts off juvenile and ends off with Lil Dicky in the body of Kendall Jenner exploring her body without her mind's consent. And here's the thing. If it was just a joke song that somehow required 3 producers and 10 writers to assemble, it's a failure because there's no coherent punchline. Is it that Lil Dicky is an oblivious, self-serving culture vulture who has charitably 2 jokes? We already knew the answer to that. We didn't need DJ Mustard recycling a lot of leftovers from 2014 in order to back it up. Is it that Chris Brown apparently is Chris Brown? We all knew that too, even as he continues to sing through layers of grating auto-tune and multi-tracking while claiming he sings so well. Is that Ed Sheeran and Kendall Jenner have no dignity? Well, we knew that from Endgame off of Reputation, and Kendall's a Kardashian who did that Pepsi ad, which is arguably funnier than anything Lil Dicky has ever written. Is it that saying the word vagina is funny when it comes from somebody who can't sing before the inner workings of it is such then explored? Yeah, for the year Brett Kavanaugh's confirmation of what felt like the societal backlash to the Me Too movement, especially in pop music, given who was elevated by the industry. It's very telling that wound up in a song co-written by a man who put Rihanna in a hospital in 2009. Yeah, some of us don't really forget things. And I got backlash to saying all this and more when I covered this at length earlier this year, which is very indicative of the culture that actually thinks this is actually funny. Because it's not. And I won't claim to have the best taste in anything, but for a song that feels really emblematic of the most tired, humiliating, unfunny, dated, and gross elements of 2018, at least I'm not stuck defending this. It's the worst song of 2018, as if it was even a contest. And right now my only bit of catharsis comes in the 2 main artists having received no success ever since then. You know what? Let's keep it that way. So yeah, thanks a lot for watching. If you'd like to like and subscribe, I'd be more than grateful. Yeah, I know this is a long list and I had a lot to say, but yeah, when you got some turds, you gotta get them out. You gotta flush them away. Thankfully, the best list is coming up soon, so stay tuned for that. And hey, if you want to like and subscribe, I'd be more than grateful. Till then, I'm Mark, you're watching Spectrum Pulse, and I'll see you next time.